Hey guys, it's Mr. Thornburg. Good to see you all in class today. Yes, I do see you all, even though I am in Italy. So I hope everybody is having a great day. Today we are going to look at the expanding markets and moving west, this chapter 9 section. So go ahead and if you would, you should have your note sheets, your study guides by now. I know I'm not here, but I am going to talk to you and sort of talk you through this PowerPoint through these chapters. You get to hear my voice, even though I'm several thousand miles away and about 6.5, 7 hours ahead of your time. So it's like what, in the morning or afternoon, depending on what class you're with. You know, if it's 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm 3 o'clock in the afternoon for me. So think of me when you're there. I am missing being with you. Okay, so chapter 9. This idea of manifest destiny and westward movement and where we're going to go and what we're going to do and fighting a war. Yes, fighting a war with Mexico, and even a small war in Texas, because, you know, everything's bigger in Texas. So we have 4 sections in chapter 9, 4 sections. We're going to start with the market revolution, manifest destiny, expansion in Texas, and the war with Mexico. That's right, the war with Mexico. We did fight several wars with Mexico, this one being the first. So, section 1, the market revolution here. When we think about the market revolution, it's a lot. This is a term produced by historians in the past that looks at this changing dynamic of American life and consumer culture between 1800 and really about 1850, 1860 time frame. And it refers to a broad scope of things, but mainly focusing on sort of economic activities of the people of the United States, the average everyday life of what the farmers are doing, of what the people in the cities are doing, and it involves everything. So in the early 1800s, prior to like 1820, 1830, most farmers are these self-sufficient families. So on your little farm, 5, 10 acres, whatever it may be. Even in the South, we have small farms. We typically think of the South as being these massive plantations, and that certainly dominates the South. But most Southerners are small farmers as well, as is the Middle Colonies and the North. In the early 1800s, just like during colonial times, farm families are self-sufficient. They're buying only what they cannot make, and they're making pretty much everything from their clothing to candles. That they've got bees in their backyard, and they're getting wax from the bees and making their own candles and hats and clothing and shoes. Buying only a few immediate necessities of what they have to have, of what's going on, things like salt or spices, maybe a meat that they can't get or a certain type of grain. But then suddenly about 1830, 1840, farmers really start to specialize in what they're doing, and they shift to this single crop or two crop system. And they're growing cash crops. So suddenly corn, if we're in the middle states, this area of like Pennsylvania, New York, and Delaware, you're seeing, and Maryland, you're seeing lots of corn and wheat and grain, sort of cereal crops being produced. In the South, we're shifting almost completely by this stage to like cotton, due to things like the cotton gin. And we're selling that surplus. We're selling almost all of our product for profit, and then we're taking that profit and buying what we need. And so this is what we refer to as the market revolution. We're buying and selling goods rather than making them ourselves. We become dependent upon other people to make stuff for us so we can buy it from them. And this really sort of gets us into this entrepreneurial spirit, this idea of capitalism at sort of its finest in the United States, where private control of business means profit. We're going to use that profit for production to grow our businesses even larger. It also shifts a true change in the Americas, because now people can live in cities and they can make money by making stuff, and they don't have to worry about growing their own stuff. They don't have to worry about spending time to grow their own food and darn their own socks and knit their own sweaters. They can do all this sort of now. They can buy all this now rather than having to do it. And we see the invention and really the excess of capital, of financial capital and physical capital and hard capital, sort of machines starting to fuel it. And it really starts out in that clothing industry, those cotton factories really starting to grow and produce it, or produce and fuel this new economy. And it's the entrepreneurs that really go. And what's driving this spirit, what's driving this this revolution, so to speak, in the United States really comes out of this thing, or this whole host of new inventions, and in a variety of reasons. And one of the first and the most key things that we see, actually two things that we see here. Charles Goodyear in 1839 creates vulcanized rubber. And wow, what vulcanized rubber allows us to do. We're starting to look at wheels now coming out, but most importantly, belts on machines. We can now put a turning wheel in and run a central pole down the middle of our factory and let it turn on a water wheel, and use rubber belts. Belts like you would see in your car. These rubber belts to move various machine parts. And the first time we really see it on a small scale, but in a larger factory section, comes with Elias Howe, who patents the first ever sewing machine. No longer, especially ladies during this time, no longer are we having to sit there with thimbles and needles and thread and trying to thread the eye of a needle and just spend time stitching and sewing and sewing and stitching until your fingers are worn down. No, now this machine can sew for you, and then I.M. Singer takes that and adds a foot treadle or a foot pedal to it. And if you look here on the let me see if I can get this ink pen to work and make a section. There we go. I.M. Singer. If you come down here and if you look at this section, that's really that foot treadle that we're looking at. And what's going to happen is that foot treadle is going to be attached to a spoke that runs right in here into a wheel. And as you put your feet and you press forward and backwards with your feet, so toes to heels, that is going to spin this wheel that's sort of right in here, okay? So that sort of area is where a wheel, and it's going to be turning a rubber belt that runs up and around and then down, okay? Up and around and down, and it just turns that machine there, and really allows us to get things going, speeds things up. And because of this, it's easier to produce clothing, and prices now are going to drop by 75% throughout this. And what this does for our households is suddenly it's cheaper to buy stuff. Our standard of living starts to go through the roof. It's easier to buy new clothing. We're no longer having to wear clothing out, and we're no longer looking at hand-me-downs and patching and darning and stitching and repairing and keeping and washing and all this clothing. Now we can have more clothing, and we start to get that consumer culture that where we can buy and discard. And we also start to use farminized or mechanized farm equipment to boost industry output to make more money so we can buy more stuff. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, it's all about buying stuff. And technology lowers the cost of factories. Workers now start to buy stuff from their factories, and people are happy because, yes, we have stuff. Stuff is a wonderful, wonderful thing. The market revolution is not, however, just limited to the home. It also has a massive impact on communication. And so within this overall economic revolution, this market revolution, we also have a communication revolution, how we speak. Now, we've had newspapers and books and letters, and obviously we can talk with words, but now we're looking in 1837, Samuel F.B. Morse develops our first telegraph, and now I can communicate near instantaneously with someone hundreds, if not thousands of miles away by simply tapping a key. Just tap, 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 on this thing called a telegraph. things are tapped in code. And see, not only does he have to invent a machine that's going to be able to tap out this message, he also has to invent an entire language, an entire alphabet that's going to go along with it. So if we think about this telegraph, this is the finger key. You can see the laser pointer sort of circling it right there. This is the finger key. This is where you put your finger. And what it does is it transmits down this isolator to here. What you see in this area is where it taps those two connections right in there, okay? Right in that area. They're simply going to bounce back and forth at each other. And so every time you push and release, it's going to send a electric impulse along the wire to the other end. Okay, and you can send this message. So if we're wanting to send a message hello, you would simply come down here to your alphabet, and you would tap 4 times. You would wait half a second, tap 1 time, wait half a second, come down here and do, oh, there we are, sorry, I lost my laser pointer there for a second. Tap once, sort of a long tap, so you would tap, tap, hold, tap, tap, okay? And you would do that twice, and then you would come over here to the letter O, which is 3 long tap holds. So if you think about it, excuse my again doing this over YouTube, dot 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 dot, and that would be hello. Okay, I realize that you probably are ignoring me at this point in time, but work with me, people. Okay. So, what we're looking at is this idea that we can manipulate the items that we have and send these messages. Suddenly we can communicate business information near instantaneously, and we really see a communication, and we start to get news transmitting faster. It's easier to do elections. Really revolutionizes what's going on here for our information and our knowledge. We also see in this market revolution a total transportation revolution as well. In 1807, Robert Fulton has been working on this steamboat. And I'm going to move ahead real quick to show you the steamboat. Don't freak out. I'm going to come back to the material. This is the steamboat. You can see it here. We have this, side wheel steamboat. So he's got a coal-fired boiler in here, actually probably wood-fired at this time. So it's this big metal tube. He's got a fire going and it throws wood into it. He's getting so hot, it's going to boil water, create steam. The steam can go into another it's in its own containment field. The water and the steam it's going to build up pressure, and that pressure is going to then be released into a piston or an engine type of machine that's going to turn and move the wheel on the steamer. Okay, it's going to move this wheel forward, and so the ship can go. It's going to move this direction, and that's sort of clockwise motion, and you can see the ship moving forward from your left to your right here, and it revolutionizes transportation during this time, because suddenly transportation becomes what would have taken you days now can literally take you hours on the river. And so river transportation speeds up so much, and within a few years we're looking on transportation on the Missouri and the Ohio and the Tennessee rivers, and of course the Mississippi River, this grandest river that is out there, this mighty Mississippi. We also see the move to change the way to build waterways where waterways don't exist. And the biggest example of this, and really the most successful example of this, and the hallmark example of building our own rivers, is this thing called the Erie Canal. The Erie Canal is heavily used. Still, parts of it are used today. And we really see the United States, because of the steamboat phenomena, really hitting on to this canal trend, because now we can rapidly move things. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, we're in wooden wagons on roads that are not paved. At best, we might have plank roads, so roads that are flat, but with wooden planks, half pieces of trees laid down on top of the road that you just sort of drag your stuff across with an oxen or a mule. So you're going to move like 10 miles maybe a day on a good day. Now on a steamboat, You can go up. I mean, think about that: 150 miles in 32 hours on one of these steamboats. That's an impressive feat of engineering there. So these canals become, and so farmers in the Midwest, and yeah, at the time this was the Midwest. I know today this is the Northeast, this is New England. This was the Midwest of the United States at the time. It's connecting these people with the lakes, with this river connection, and we can go and we can see here we're connecting the Great Lakes all the way with the Atlantic Ocean via the Hudson River. So starting here at Troy, we can see boats. This canal was built all the way across through the Little Falls down to Utica here. We're going down here. We see coming up to Rochester, all the way down to Buffalo, where the Buffalo Bills play at, bypassing Niagara Falls through Erie, to Lake Erie, connecting what is, and from here you can get to the Mississippi River. From here you can now get to the Atlantic Ocean via the Hudson River on this side through the Erie Canal. And what was key about the Erie Canal, there's a lot of change of elevation through here. So there's not a river. You can't just build it straight without blowing up lots of mountains and taking lots of money to do that. So what they end up doing is building this lock system to move boats up and down these different elevations. And so you can see this little boat right here in this upper right-hand corner. It's going to enter this lock system. And this lock system, you can see the next level right here. They're going to take this lock, and the water in here, they're going to let it drain down into this section. And the boat is going to raise up to where it's level here, and it's going to move into this section. They're going to shut two doors right here. They're going to drain this upper section. The boat's going to rise up. And so similar until it gets up to the top, it's going to slide into the next section of the river of the Erie Canal and just move on its merry way, whichever way we're sort of looking at, okay? And Oneida Lake and some of these finger lakes here and rivers are the ones providing the water for this to work. Ingenious system here that really revolutionizes. You can get stuff goods, and now you can buy stuff from the capital of Albany. If you're here in Syracuse, it's now just a 2-day journey to Albany or so, where it may have been a week beforehand. So goods become easier to move and easier to transport. So not only do canals change our transportation, but also we see railroads. Railroads come out during this time. Railroads first appear in the 1700s, late 1700s in Great Britain, and come to America in the early 1700s. By 1840, railroads are far costlier than canal, but it's faster. They can operate in winter because, I mean, if you think about it up here, let's go back to this picture. Guess what's happening to the water up here in, I don't know, January? If you can't imagine what's happening here, go talk to Mr. Dragoon, okay? The water's going to freeze over. You're not going to move a boat down those rivers, but railroads can. Now these early railroads are incredibly uncomfortable to ride on. They're actually really dangerous to ride on. The steam engines tend to have a bad habit of blowing up, and the cabs. And you can see here a cab of a. Now this was the engine itself, and this would be like the coal or wood trolley, but the cab itself will be open. And so as the fire here is burning, all those embers and soot and smoke are coming back down. And as the train is moving forward, it's all coming right into those cabs. But by the 1850s, it's cheaper, it's safer, and far more effective to move your goods. And more importantly, railroads can go places where boats can't. Right? I mean, simply put, it's just that simple. They can get you places where boats just certainly aren't going to. So these new links, these new things are these canals, this communication, these railroads link up these regions in ways that we've never seen before. Suddenly people inland are talking, they start to develop a sense of identity in themselves and of themselves. By 1838, we're also starting to build a national road from Cumberland, Maryland to Springfield, Illinois. We're moving westward. We're looking westward, and we're wanting to make it easier for people to move westward. And that happens in the north and the mid-east, but in the south, not so much, okay? The south is a is a conservative area. It's got its slaves, it's got its plantations, and the South is agricultural, and the South is going, by God, we're going to farm cotton, we're going to farm tobacco, we're going to farm rice, and we're not going to change. That has made us money since the Jamestown settlers in 1609, when John Rolfe brought those tobacco seeds to Jamestown. It's made us money since then. It's 1840-ish, 1850. Why change a good thing? It's working. Well, it's not working for everybody, right? It's not working for natives. It's not working for women. It's not working for Africans. But in the South, and those people really didn't matter, right? Unfortunately, those people didn't matter for us. Quite frankly, they didn't matter anywhere in the United States, but especially in the South. So the South stays focused on agriculture. Now, part of that is because that's the way things have always been done in the South, and the South is traditional in that regard. The other reason is the South has spent so much money. These people who, had they been living in the North, would have been the ones investing in the factories and in the canals and in the railroads. In the South, they put all their money into land. And they put all their money into slaves. They put all their money into machines which will help them grow crops, which will help them grow that tobacco and cotton and rice. Indigo, by the way, is not really grown much anymore. And so the South has so much money tied up in slavery and in farming. They don't have the money to build factories. And they're scared, really. They're scared to invest in this. Because they could risk a lot. You know, that's the business thing, right? That's capitalism. Why do people get into business? Think back to your civics class. Why do people get into business? Business to make a profit. You know, no one gets in business going, I want to lose money. I want to lose millions of dollars. Nobody does that. They want to make money. Shifting from agriculture, which you know is going to make you money, maybe not a lot of money, but it's going to make you money, to a system that is different and can risk a lot. And the farmers are just not, the plantation owners are just not willing to risk that. So while the South remains agricultural, the Northeast shifts to shipping and really becomes focused on shipping and manufacturing. Because of its canals, because of the railroad, the investment into those easier transportation methods and means, the North becomes the center of American commerce during this time. And New York City starts to outpace Philadelphia and Boston and Philadelphia as the primary economic center of the United States. And a large part of that is sort of based on its location, its huge harbors, and easy access to the Atlantic Ocean and then to Europe itself. And because of this manufacturing in the United States, goods become cheaper and better. The quality goes up, the price comes down, the quantity goes up, and your money starts to go further. The cost of living is good, but inflation is actually sort of held down at the time. Now, out in the Midwest, something happens which even makes this even easier. Out in the Midwest, which is now we can really start to get to like Ohio and Illinois and Indiana and Wisconsin and Michigan and Minnesota, right? Minnesota. We bought the Louisiana Purchase, so even Kentucky and Tennessee and some of these areas. I know, right? It's hard to think of Kentucky as Midwest, but it was during this time. They're farmers still, but they're not the South farmers. They're not slavery farmers. These are farmers who have a couple hundred acres and they're growing cereal crops. They're growing wheat and rye and barley, even some corn. And they're doing this the old-fashioned way until this guy by the name of John Deere comes along, and he invents this steel-tip plow. And now this steel-tip plow, which you can see, I'm going to move it ahead real quick. You can see up here, this is the steel-tip plow, which John Deere first invents. We'd use rough iron, you know, just sort of what we would call sort of pig iron. Iron is wrought iron, which is, if it hits a rock, it's going to shatter, it's going to break, it's going to get Doyle. I don't know what the heck Doyle is. Dull, D-U-L-L. But this new steel, this tougher, sharper material, it cuts through dirt so much easier, especially when attached to a team of horses. And so it's easier actually now to grow crops. Actually less labor intensive, and now farmers can grow and work even more parts of their farm. They can work a larger sort of acreage than they used to. And then Cyrus McCormick. Now you know Cyrus McCormick, whether you realize you do or not. If you like ground black pepper, you probably have McCormick's black pepper or spices. He comes in those little red jars in like Walmart or the grocery store. They say McCormick on the top of them in a little red label. They're red and white little tins of pepper. That's sort of what they're most famous known for. But McCormick actually, not only does he do spices and pepper and all that stuff, he does a mechanical reaper. And so now one person can do the work of what it used to take 5 farmers to do, 5 people to do. And so farmers can now move from subsistence farming, simply growing enough food to live on, to growing cash crops. And that was part of that original trend that I mentioned a few minutes ago, probably about 15 minutes ago now, looking at my clock. We can see that shift, and it allows them to grow more and then sell more to the cities. New York's starting to have thousands, hundreds of thousands of people living in it. Immigrants are coming in. Well, they have to eat food. They're not able to grow food living in these tenements and in these houses. So we're seeing these farmers ship all their food back to the east and get money for it, and then they can buy stuff. Buying stuff. It's America's greatest pastime, right? This bottom picture is actually a picture of the McCormick Reaper. You see 2 horses here. It's just simply a thing. The horses pull this wheel, turns a belt, and it's got a little cutting mechanism going on in here, and it simply goes through. This is a wheat field, and it goes through, and it just cuts right down at the bottom. Pair of sausage just cuts all this out. It bundles it all up, and there we go. That's my noise for there we go. For reapers, it moves that wheat up and bundles it nicely in this neat little thing where farmers can then come back and sort of retake care of it and what they need. And that's section 1. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Good to see you all again, or talk to you all again. If I'm not able to see you here, section 2. I'm still out of the country here, still working on these videos for you. Today we're going to look at section 2 as part of Manifest Destiny. This basic, my laser pointer is getting on my nerves, and I really don't know why it's doing that. It shouldn't be doing that. Stop doing that. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay, we're good now. Apologize. A few technical issues here. Thousands of miles from where you're at. A few technical issues, but where you go. So Manifest Destiny, this idea that we have a God-given right. Okay, God has declared it in the heavens, written it above, that Americans have a rightful reason to expand westward, to expand to the Pacific Ocean. And that's what we have to do. Before 1840, most Americans don't go past the Mississippi River. After 1840, the West is open. It's open land. It's actually, for the most part, free land. And no one lives there, unless you're the Native Americans. And the Americans really don't see the natives, the Indians, as being people. So it's land that we can go and take. But Manifest Destiny, you need to star that in your notes, okay? So take your notes, do something, star this concept of Manifest Destiny. You're going to need it. You're going to need to know it. It's important. Please, please, please know Manifest Destiny, okay? I cannot express enough how much you're going to need to know that later on. It's a huge concept in this class and in this unit. We are destined, we are granted by God the right to expand to the Pacific Ocean. So, how do we do that? Well, by 1837, we're looking for a fresh start because we've just had an economic collapse. We've seen banks close, we've seen the economy drop, and people are looking for a fresh start. People are looking for something new to do. We're looking for new markets, new people to sell to. And the Pacific Ocean opens up to us Asia. It opens up to us South America, the west coast of South America for trade. We need to be able to protect our property on the western half of the United States on the Pacific Ocean, so we need military bases. And we've got to get people there. We've got to get people in the middle of this country. And because to claim the land, you have to be on the land. And so if America says, hey, I own it, but I'm not in it, can we really claim it? And we can. So we look at this idea of manifest destiny, of conquering this territory, of going out and getting it, because God has given us the right. We are destined to expand to the Pacific Ocean. And we have this image, and I love this painting. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it because we're going to look at it when I get back and when we do some of the daily prompts and the daily, the A part section. We're really going to delve into this photo. But this is a nice little image of manifest destiny expanding westward and Lady America here in this concept of God giving us the right to move to the west and bring light and all that is good to the west. So, manifest destiny, moving to the west, bringing the light of God and the light of industrialization and civilization to the people. So, how do we interact with natives as we move westward, as we're in this manifest destiny section? Well, remember, there are three ways to deal with natives. The Spanish convert them, the French trade with them, and the Americans and the English would kill them. Okay? That's essentially what we do. Most native peoples seek to maintain their own traditions. They're their traditions. These traditions make them who they are. They've lived on buffalo and all these other things that have constructed their identities, and they want to keep those identities. It's like Italians moving into the United States in the 1870s, the 1880s. They want to keep what it is that makes them Italian, and so we get pizza and we get pasta, and we see guys like Dean Martin, and we have this Italian identity, Little Italy. The same thing for the Irish in New York and Boston. Little Ireland coming out with these pubs and whatnot. We seek to maintain those identities. For the natives, they have to move further west, and in some cases get in conflict with other native groups in order to maintain their own traditions. Some will attempt to assimilate into white culture. The Eastern Men and the Cherokee Indians are one example of that. And a few try to fight to keep the whites out. One group that tries to fight are the Black Hawk. In the 1830s, settlers in Illinois and Iowa start pressuring natives to go west. And Chief Black Hawk leads a rebellion in Illinois. And it's a sort of a brief, nasty war. The Sauk and Fox tribes are defeated by the American military, and they're forced to move west of the Mississippi River. And this is a process that we see over and over. White settlers moving into territory that's being lived on and used by Native peoples, Native Americans, or First Peoples. War inevitably, it seems, following because of the Americans and their process of seeing the natives as being uncivilized savages, barbarians, and taking what the natives have. And then, of course, sort of the natives fighting back, and then the federal government sends soldiers in, the natives dying and moving further west through a treaty. There are attempts, however, to negotiate with Native Americans. And it typically occurs in what, as historians, we have started to call the middle ground. And the middle ground is area that is dominated neither by the Native Americans or Native peoples or the whites. So in these areas where they merge together, but both rely upon each other, becomes that middle ground. And so for the most part, especially after the 1830 Indian Removal Act, this becomes area west of the Mississippi River. Everything east does sort of become white people with America's white American, territory, not native land. This is further set forth in the 1851 Treaty of Fort Laramie, because even with this sort of middle ground concept, natives still want their land, still want to keep their land, and still want to fight for their land and their culture and their ideas and their values and their traditions. And this is something sort of distinctly American. It's mine, and by God I want it, I'm going to fight to keep it and fight to keep my traditions and values alive. And the natives fight not to lose their hand, not to be forced off of their land, because these white people moving in want to take it. And the Treaty of 1851 really starts to set forth this and set a precedent for how we're going to deal with natives over really the sort of the next 40 years. And the process goes something like this. We come into conflict with a Native American. The United States comes into conflict with a Native American tribe. White settlers come into conflict with a Native American tribe. The federal government comes in, and we sign it after a brief fight. The federal government comes in, meets with the chiefs, the leaders of the various Native tribes, the Native groups. They sign a treaty. And with that treaty, the United States promises that white settlers will respect the borders of the Native peoples. The Native peoples promise not to attack settlers. Some cases, the settlers agree to get stuff from the natives. The natives may agree to get stuff from the federal government. And we promise all will be well because we have agreed to the boundaries, and this land is yours and that land is mine, and we promise we won't cross the line. And that's right up until the United States and U.S. settlers, white settlers, find something that they want that's on the native land, in which case we go back to those are just savage barbarians, and we're just going to take it. And so particularly what we want on those native lands are buffalo and elk, especially their hides. So we go after the buffalo and the elk to kill them, to force the natives off the land. We go after it because we like the hides for leather, for clothing, and for various other purposes. We start finding gold in certain areas, and more importantly, we just want the land. And so we start violating them over and over and over. This is sort of the process that we see. So the process of moving west is not an easy one, and it's not one that is undertaken lightly by any means. And it's not just sort of a free-for-all. Go west, young man, and get your kicks on Route 66. You can tell as I'm doing this, I'm a little tired now in speaking. Get your kicks on Route 66 as you go west. There was no Route 66 today, but they did have the Santa Fe Trail and the most popular trail west, the Oregon Trail. So thousands move west on old native trails, but two in particular find their way to prominence. The Santa Fe Trail goes from Independence, Missouri, south down through Oklahoma and Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, to Santa Fe, New Mexico, what was originally this Spanish settlement, or was still actually a Spanish and capital of the New Mexican territory of Mexico. You know, this was actually a province of Mexico at the time. Mexico had declared its independence from Spain. And so Americans are funneling through Texas, which is still part of Spain, or Mexico, into Arizona, which was part of Mexico, into New Mexico, which is part of New Mexico, and from there into California, which was part of Mexico. You notice a trend here. A lot of that's part of Mexico, but called New Mexico. The other trail is the Oregon Trail, and this is the one that's by far the most popular. You can see down here in the corner I've posted the great screenshot game, You Have Died of Dysentery. You are going to be playing soon the Oregon Trail. Yes, I said that you're going to be playing a computer game in class. How many classes let you do that other than like maybe Mr. Ashley's? Dadgummit, it's doing it again. Okay, here we go. Mr. Ashley's class. Sorry, my highlighter did weird things. The Oregon Trail is the most popular of these trails westward. Goes from Independence, Missouri to Portland, Oregon. They're using these great Constaga wagons and handcarts, and it can take months. We're talking about 6, 8. If you get lost, 12, 14 months to get from Independence, Missouri to Oregon, to the west coast, to Portland. And from Portland, then you can go down south to California, down to Cali, see some South Beach, take a little wine in the Sonoma, in the Sonoma Valley area, go see the Golden Gate. The bridge wasn't there yet, but you can see the Golden Gate, relax near San Fran, go see Sacramento, and see a little Chinatown, or whatever else you want to do when you're in Cali. Maybe catch some waves on the shoreline. So here we see two views here of these trails. The one on the top left-hand corner is the Santa Fe Trail. The one on the bottom right-hand is the Oregon Trail. You can see here they're actually moving up and through this Oregon Trail in these great wagon trains of people moving. You can see here with horses and oxen. This one actually is trying to get his wagon out of a road rut. It's probably rained a little bit from where this picture was drawn from memory. And so all these wagons in front of him have sort of rutted out the road, and this guy's getting stuck. And they're trying to get the wagon out of the ruts, and down you can see some people walking. And you would actually not ride the wagon a lot. You would do most of the trail walking, because the wagon is what's going to have all of your goods and all your stuff in it. And without that, your good is lost. But individuals are not the only groups moving west, or things happening during this time, because we see in the first sort of truly American faith being developed, and that is the Church of Latter-day Saints, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Joseph Smith is in New York, and he has a revelation from God. And so what he does is he goes and he gets these, and I apologize if we have any members of the LDS Church, the Latter-day Saints Church here, commonly called Mormons. I'm going to try to do a brief overview of the history of your faith. I apologize if I get anything wrong. I'm a little tired right now. So anyway, what we see happening is Joseph Smith actually creates this, or gets these 2 tablets, and he gets a seer stone from the archangel, one of the archangels, Gabriel maybe. I'm not positive on that at this point. Anyway, he gets these seer stones. He's able to translate these tablets, these golden tablets that he has, and he really comes sort of with the last revelation of the Bible. The story of Christ after resurrection, after he ascends into heaven, and that's sort of what constitutes the Book of Mormon. Once he's read them, once he's translated them into the Book of Mormon, the tablets are then buried and the seer stone is moved. And we see Joseph Smith forming this Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in New York. Now, they're sort of not welcome in New York, and so they move west, or they move, Joseph Smith and his few small followers at the time move west into Illinois, and they settle there for quite a while, and they start growing. And one of the things that we see happening, one of the key points of controversy initially for the Mormon Church, is they practice polygamy, where one man would have multiple wives, and practice marriage with multiple wives across the board. And this really starts to upset people in Illinois. And so after a couple clashes in Illinois, honestly, they then moved to Missouri, and Joseph Smith along this trail is eventually killed, and eventually dies along this trail, and his friend and successor Brigham Young takes over, and essentially they move into Missouri. And so while they're in Missouri, they're continuously attacked because of polygamy, because of a few other issues, and Brigham Young, sort of following in the footsteps of Joseph Smith, starts to grow the Mormon Church leaps and bounds and in huge numbers. Says that the Mormons really are not able, the church is not able to remain in the United States, and so they move to the Great Salt Lake City. To the Great Salt Lake out in Utah, and really there's almost create their own country, an attempt to create their own country at one point, but today it's obviously the state of Utah. There are other territorial disputes which go on throughout this period. In 1842, the Webster-Ashburton Treaty will settle borders in the east and the Midwest with Great Britain, in Canada primarily, especially up around like Minnesota, Michigan, and Wisconsin areas, and along the parallels up there, along the latitude lines with like Montana and Idaho and Oregon and all those other issues, and then we get annexation of Oregon, the rest of Oregon, 5440 or fight, which is that line that we're looking for. If we don't get the land by this line, then we're going to go to war over it. We about went to war over Oregon. But then in 1846, we see the British agreeing to extend the boundary along the 49th parallel, giving us the modern-day borders of the United States. And so Americans are moving westward. And with that, we end Section 3. Thank you for listening. It's right about just a little under 20 minutes. So not too bad. I'm trying to keep these things reasonable for you here. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you later. Ciao. Hey everybody, once again back. Good to talk to you again today. Section 3, the expansion in Texas. We are going for Texas because everything is better in Texas. Texas bread, Texas toast. Right, everything's bigger. The stars are bright. The stars tonight are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas. Texas, I just don't know. I'm not a big fan of Texas. I'll be honest with you. And my problem mainly stems with Texas and the fact of the way they do barbecue. Texas is all about beef barbecue, and quite frankly, beef barbecue is just an abomination before God. It's just what it is. You can grill beef, you can braise beef, but barbecuing, you can only barbecue pork. It's in the Bible. It's there. It's in Leviticus, okay? I promise you it's there. So anyway, expansion into Texas and how we get there. Americans actually move into the Southwest along the Santa Fe Trail, which we talked back in Section 2 about, leading from Independence, Missouri down to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and to all points in between. It really comes out under the mission system. And it starts under the Spanish. A few thousand Mexican settlers move into present-day Texas to grow crops. And the Spanish, remember, are trying to convert natives. But what happens is Mexico starts offering lands. If you go to Texas, this is what the Spanish told the people in Mexico. If you go to Texas and you start missions and you try to convert people to Roman Catholicism, we are going to give you land. Okay, government officials, ranchers are going to get hundreds, if not thousands, of acres of land. But then in the early 1800s, while all this is starting to go on, Mexico becomes independent, and a whole new system has to start working out. Because Mexico wants to encourage trade with the United States. It's just become an independent nation, is wanting to grow its economy, is wanting to become more prosperous. But Native American groups really start to sort of threaten these early Mexican settlements in northern Mexico or northern Texas and along the Rio Grande and various other locations, El Paso, Santa Fe, some of these areas. And so really what happens in order to try to sort of protect this land from these native groups, and this area is sort of home to some of the most warlike of these native groups, Mexico actually goes to the United States. Mexican ambassadors and officials go to the United States and actually encourage farmers to move into Texas to civilize the land. Because, to be civilized means you're going to live in a house, you're going to farm, and more importantly, you're going to stay in one place, you're going to convert to a religion. And it is wildly successful. Here is basically free land. Or the next best thing. These impresarios, these agents, are offering very cheap land grants to these American settlers, these Anglo settlers, become Mexican citizens. They become Mexicans. For all intents and purposes, they don't see themselves as Mexican. They are subjected to Mexican rules and the laws of the country of Mexico. And Mexico is going through a bit of a trouble during this time. They're in a couple revolutions and some civil wars that happen. It's not all, peaches and ice cream and a chocolate cake and whipped cream and cherries on top and, gold and all this other good jazz. I don't know, glitter, I don't know, whatever floats your boat, peels your pineapple, splits your banana, whatever may happen for you, whatever gets you going, is not happening for these people, okay? In Mexico. And in Texas, a guy by the name of Steve Austin, which is where we get Austin, Texas from. They named the city after him. Stephen Austin establishes sort of the first colony in 1821. And the old 300 are going to get 177 farming acres each, which is, or 4,428 grazing. Think about that. 4,000, almost 4,500 grazing acres for cattle. Again, beef. And I like beef. I like things that go moo. But when you're barbecuing, it's got to go oink. Because if it doesn't go oink, you can't eat everything but the oink. That's the thing with barbecue. You got to roast pig. It's just how it is. But these U.S. settlers, these Anglo settlers, these people becoming Mexicans, these people brought in from the United States to Texas, to Mexico, are restricted where they can go to. They are restricted above the Rio Grande River. And these U.S. citizens want that land. That's below it. They want more land. They want more and more property to grow, to protect, to civilize, to cultivate. And Mexico is suddenly starts going, ooh, maybe this is a bad idea. Who are all these crazy Americans starting to come into our country and demand stuff and demand land and demand? And no, you cannot buy land. No, we're not going to sell. We're not going to sell Texas. I mean, maybe it would have been better if they had, but they refused to sell Texas. And so while we're getting this message to come to Texas, while we're having this conflict over buying land, other differences start to arise between Anglos in Texas and in Mexico and Mexicans. For one, it's the language barrier. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about English as the national language in the United States, and you hear people going, hey, if they're coming to the United States, they should speak English. Well, guess what? In certain parts of the United States, the people who were originally there were speaking Spanish and not English. And I always sort of laugh at that when I think of Texas and I hear people from Texas going, oh God, they should speak English. And I'm like, well, you sort of took the people who were, the people who originally lived there spoke Spanish. So that's what they were saying about you. By God, I wish these people would learn Spanish and learn to speak the language of the time. So anyway, sorry, I got on my little rant there and I apologize for that. Anyway. So we see a lot of things changing. Not only is conflict over language there, but there's also conflict over slaves. Mexico had abolished slavery. They did not like the process of slavery, but the Southerners, who are the farmers who are coming into Texas, are bringing their slaves with them. And the native sort of Texans, these Tejanos, are by the 1830s are outnumbered by these English. The Mexican government has now sort of opened the floodgates to these English settlers coming in, and they start trying to cut it off. And the new Mexican president, Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, all you really need to know is his last two names, Santa Anna, okay, essentially says, you're stopping. Nobody else is coming in. And he goes and he arrests Stephen Austin. Big mistake, because now the Texans are mad. These Anglos that are living in Texas, rise up and fight against Mexico. And we're in the Texas Revolution. And the Tejanos are actually sort of helping them with it. They don't like being Mexican. They're not part of Mexico. They're thousands of miles away from Mexico City. They don't believe that the Mexican government is treating them fairly or listening to them. And so they sort of help. They rebel. They declare their independence. They have their own Declaration of Independence, just like the United States. See, I told you that Declaration of Independence was going to be important, inspiring all kinds of revolutions throughout the world, including the revolution in Texas. And, of course, when they declare their independence, Mexico and Santa Anna goes, I don't think so, no. You're not going to be free. You're part of Mexico. This is what it is. And they move just like we would if Nebraska decided to declare its independence and started creating its own military. The United States government is going to go in, Nebraska and go, Nebraska, you're not going to be independent. We're going to put you down. And that's what sort of was happening with Mexico here. They moved to Texas and said, hey, look, you're not going to become independent. No, you're part of Mexico. You came in here knowing that you're part of Mexico. Get over it. And so the Texas government at the time, led by Steve Austin, comes together. They create their own militia in the mold of the American Revolution, and they start creating outposts and forts, trying to control territory and stop the Mexican army from coming up. And one of those places they do is this old this old Roman Catholic mission, the Alamo. And you see the Alamo right here, this old church places where monks could go and live. There were schools here, there were churches here, and it was an enclosed sort of like area where they could control what was happening. But these Texans hold up here, and Santa Anna comes in and surrounds them, and he says, surrender! And the Texans go, no. And people like Daniel Boone and some of the other great, Jim Bowie are in here. And then one day, Santa Anna attacks the Alamo, this old church. He kills every one of the U.S. people, these revolutionaries, these citizens of Texas who were in the fort, except for one person. He lets that person go to tell everybody what he's done, and 187 Americans are dead, and Texans go, remember the Alamo! And we're going to fight for our freedom, and they win! They create what's called the Lone Star Republic, an independent government, an independent country in Texas. And Sam Houston, the greatest sort of these Texas leaders, Sam Houston eventually defeats Santa Anna and the Mexican army at the Battle of San Jacinto. And I'm probably sorry if I mispronounce the Spanish. I apologize. I am horrible in foreign languages. I don't even do English well, as y'all well know. But by 1836, Texas is recognized by Mexico as being an independent country, and Sam Houston becomes the president of the Republic of Texas. And in 1838, Houston goes, I like being for independent, but you know what? I'm an American first. And in 1838, he invites the United States to annex Texas, to incorporate, to take Texas in and make Texas part of the United States. The South loves it because they already have slavery in Texas. The North is like, no, you cannot become part of this, because they actually have a very delicate balance in the Senate between slave states and free states. And they're worried that the slave states may become too powerful, and so they don't want that. But in 1845, Texas becomes a state, becomes this next state in the Union. Opposite of that, so if Texas becomes a state, we also have to add another state in. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But we see Texas becoming a state, and this is how we get Texas. Now, there's a great story about Texas that is actually partially true. At one time, part of the Texas state constitution actually granted Texas the right, whenever it felt like, to once again become its own country. And there's this great story that Texas, if they wanted to at any time, could break away and become its own country. Well, yes, but no. That was the old days prior to the U.S. Civil War. After the U.S. Civil War, when Texas came back into the Union as a state, back into the United States, they had to remove that portion of their state constitution. Texas does not have a right to become its own state. Sorry to burst your bubbles. You may think that Texas would be great being its own state. Sometimes I think Texas would be great to let it be its own country. And sort of like Florida and California. Just let those two parts of those three countries go away. Those three states go away, and just let the United States. Would be poorer, but by God, I think we might be a little bit better without them. So anyway, that's section 3. We're wrapping up this Texas Revolution, War of Independence. Remember the Alamo. The key figure in there, you got to remember the Alamo. So star that market. I'm going to go back here to it real quick. Remember the Alamo, this great battle cry. As we remember the 187 men who died in this fort fighting for their independence. You see, the Declaration of Independence did have a huge impact on these people, on these early Americans, and everything they thought, and everything they believed, and everything that they did. The stars tonight are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas. Okay, I'm going to quit singing. You're probably not listening anyway, so here we go. By the way, wake up and put your cell phones up. Or maybe get them out. I don't know. We'll see what happens. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're done with section 3. I'll talk to you again a little bit later when we get to section 4. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It's good to talk to you again, speak with you again, speak at you again, depending on which way it is. Make sure you have your cell phones up. Yes, even though I'm not here with you, I do know some of you have your cell phones out. Mr. Huffman, if it's his second period, quit playing that football game that you got going on. I know it. And in the back, ladies, put your phones up, back there in the back corner. Even though I may be far, far away, I still see you. I know what's going on. I have little cameras playing across the room. I've seen it all. That's right. Ha ha! Well, now see if you figure out if I really have or not. You never know. So anyway, Section 4 of Chapter 9 deals with the war with Mexico. Because of our decision to annex Texas, Mexico, which very reluctantly agreed to the independence of Texas, is totally opposed to the idea of the United States becoming more powerful and the United States getting Texas. They're like, this ain't going to work. And so what happens is Mexico declares war, or the United States declares war, actually. The United States declares war on Mexico, trying to enforce its attempts and its decision to annex Texas. President Polk is the President of the United States when all this happens, and he is a war hawk, okay? He is a hawk. He believes in a strong military. He believes in using the military at all possible times and places. You can see good old Polk right up here, sort of that hawkish nose with the beak, flowing quite almost like his tail feathers back here with his hair. I don't know. Polk's a weird guy. Polk actually is one of the biggest expenders of the United States because he expands the United States, expenders of the United States, expansionist in the United States. He moves into California and Texas and Arizona and New Mexico and parts of Colorado and Utah and the Gadsden Purchase. But within this, he's going to get in Texas and New Mexico, which at the time was New Mexico and Arizona, California, Oklahoma, and Texas, and he's willing to go to war for it, okay? He's willing to go there, and so what he does, he wants Texas, and in fact, he's already in the process of annexing Texas, and in the process, they're trying to firm up the borders, okay? Borders are very, very important. Where are the lines between Texas and the United States? Because Texas is really by now part of the United States. So where is the border between the United States and Mexico? Where is that border between Texas and Mexico? Good question even today, right? So what happens is Polk sends John Slidell down to Mexico City to buy the Southwest, to buy New Mexico, Arizona, California area, and to negotiate this final Texas border. And while he's down there, Santa Anna, who had lost, who was humiliated by this defeat by Sam Houston, is kicked out. Basically, a coup d'etat occurs. And so what happens is the Mexican government really is leaderless. No one knows what's going on. So while he's down there, John Slidell is really sort of ignored. And Polk is furious. How dare this Mexican government ignore the Americans and not give in to us and not give us exactly what we want. And so in order to try to force the Mexican government to listen to the Americans and to do what we want, Polk orders the United States Army and the Marines and the Navy under the command of General Zachary Taylor to the Rio Grande and to blockade the river, to stop traffic on the river, to capture barges and things moving on the river. This sort of and the idea is that this economic sanction is going to force Mexico to negotiate in good faith with the United States. In other words, Polk's saying, if you're going to ignore us, we're going to cut off a huge chunk of your economic income, your money that's coming in, and we're going to force you to pay attention to us and eventually give us what we want. And if you don't give us what we want, we'll just take what we want. Well, now in the United States, this action is not really seen universally with favor. The North is opposed to it. The South is in favor of it. The South is in favor of it because it wants to extend slavery. It wants to increase its power in Congress to protect slavery and to protect the profits that it has. The North is opposed to it. They fear slavery. You got to think, the two different groups, the North is a group that's sitting here based on manufacturing and shipping. Slaves don't work well in that area, and they don't have slaves. In the South, they're agricultural, and they believe that they need slaves to be able to harvest, because guess what? McCormick's Reaper doesn't harvest cotton. Okay, cotton is something that has to be picked. There's no machine at the time that can pick it, and so they feel they have to have slavery. So the South favors war because it's going to get us Texas and all these areas, and we can make those areas slave areas. The North is opposed to it because it fears slavery, and it fears that the South is going to take control of the United States, and what's going to happen. And the country really can't sort of make us determine. And North and South, by this time, by the 1840s, by 1848 especially, 1845, the North and the South are just, they're almost two separate countries within one country. They just despise each other. The South are like these flipping Yankees, are just mean, arrogant. They're hateful, they're controlling, they're trying to tell us how to live. The Northerners, like those dumb Southerners, well, maybe not dumb, but those Southerners, those slave owners, those oppressive people, those backwards people who are just trying to keep everything the way it's always been. They don't like each other. They refuse to talk with each other. And so when neither side can agree what to do, President Polk says, I'll start my own war. If Congress won't declare war on Mexico and give me what I want, then I'll just do it myself. And so what he has is the United States around the Rio Grande has constantly sort of crossed into Mexican territory, and near Matamoros, we cross into Mexican territory, and the Mexican military goes, by God, you're not coming into Mexico. It would be like us, we don't like the idea of drug cartels, or heaven forbid the Mexican military crosses onto United States borders or United States territory. The United States military is going to be going smack, smack, smack. I don't know if you can hear my, we won't beat somebody up trying to fight and defend our land. Well, Mexico's doing the same thing in the 1840s. You're coming onto our land. We're going to fight to protect our territory. This is ours. It's not yours. We're going to fight. And they kill 9 Americans. Polk spins this as Mexico has killed American soldiers. We must respond. He leaves out the part that says, and I ordered the soldiers to invade Mexico, to cross into Mexico territory illegally. I ordered them into Mexico illegally, and they got shot. So I caused them to be killed, but he ignores that part. Of course, he's not going to talk about that, because that could make him look bad. He sends this message to Congress going, hey, Mexico killed Americans. We have to go to war. And Congress, whoo, yeah, Mexico attacked the United States. Enemy number 1, let's go at it. And they go after Mexico. They declare war on Mexico. They start to stifle opposition to the war. And they really just have a grand old time. And the United States military sort of starts to go in a couple different directions. Now, Polk wants the Southwest. Remember, that's one of the things that Slidell was supposed to do, was to try to buy the Southwest. So Polk orders a guy by the name of Stephen Kearny, colonel in the military, to take a group of soldiers to Santa Fe. And when he gets to Santa Fe goes, we give up. Whatever. We actually like you better than we like Mexico because you're closer to us than Mexico. Okay, so we're happy with you. You're here, and they're not. So we're part of the United States now. New Mexico surrenders without a fight. Kearny goes, we're good. He starts turning his direction southward to Mexico, while out in California, in the 1830s, we see thousands of Mexican settlers moving into California. In the 1840s, there's about 500 Americans. So 12,000 to 500. Well, in 1846, while all this is going on, John C. Fremont, who is an American out in California, proclaims the independent Republic of California. He's trying to do very similar to what's going on in Texas, to what Texas did. Except Fremont's nowhere near as good at it as what Sam Houston and Stephen Austin were. Kearny, when all this stuff starts going on in California, Kearny takes his soldiers and goes to California to claim California and really sort of make sure Fremont doesn't get himself killed. and the U.S. Naval Force sails into San Francisco and Los Angeles, and California becomes independent and then becomes part of the United States. And we're now at war with Mexico. And this is really a one-sided war. America's two greatest generals at the time, Zachary Taylor and Winfield Scott, both attacked the United States. Zachary Taylor, Polk actually plays Mexican politics a little bit. He plays the Mexicans' political system against each other. Managed to get Santa Anna back on back in charge, back as president of Mexico. And then Santa Anna turns around and declares, starts fighting the Americans. And that doesn't go over real well with Polk, but, because Polk was like, hey, I helped you become president. You were supposed to give everything that I wanted to me. And Santa Anna goes, it's Mexican. I just fought a war with Texas about this. What made you think I was just going to give it up because you helped me get power? So the United States invades Mexico, and we really go heck bend. All out for Mexico City. If you know the Marine Corps hymn, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, the very first line of the first stanza of the Marine Corps hymn, the United States Marine Corps, from the halls of Montezuma, because in the 1840s, in these late 1840s, it's the United States Marines that attack and help capture Mexico City. The halls of Montezuma, right? Montezuma was a great leader of the old Aztec Empire. Mexico City, so it's got that sort of nice alliteration right there, right? So from the halls of Montezuma, the United States Marines are leading the fight against the Mexicans and charging in, and we win. 1848, we beat the Mexicans, and we forced the Mexican Santa Anna to sign the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. And what we do is we draw the border with Mexico at the Rio Grande River, which is far more territory than what we had originally had. Our border did not extend to the Rio Grande. Here in a minute, I'm going to show you a picture, a map. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and click it real quick. The original border actually started somewhere right in here and went up this way. Okay, so that whole southern half. If I can click back here and get a pin, we're looking at somewhere right in here. All that land was still part of Mexico at the time. Well, after this war, we get all this. We get all this area up in here, this bright yellow area. In 1848, that one we talked about back in the last section, we've gotten that. So we're gaining a lot out of this. And Polk says, hey, I've done what I need, right? He wins. He's gone. 1848. Zachary Taylor, the hero of the Mexican-American War of 1848, is elected president. But not everything's done. The other thing that I want you to know, the other piece that you need to know here, and it's a minor thing, but it seems to keep popping up. You need to know this thing called the Gadsden Purchase. For my fourth period class, this one seems to, from talking with Mr. Lubowitz and AP students in the past, that one seems to pop up quite a lot. Now, my first and second period, just because I mentioned my fourth period, doesn't mean that you don't need to know that, okay? Doesn't mean that you don't need to know the Gadsden Purchase, but it's really a sort of fourth period thing. 1848, Zachary Taylor beats the Whig nominee, or wins the election. The Democrat, and that's because the Democrats are divided between Northern Democrats and Southern Democrats over this issue of slavery. But so you know what territory we're looking at here, okay? So what we're looking at, this area right here, this is, I'm trying to write with my mouse. That's a really, sorry, hold on. That's just awful. Yeah, that was bad. I'm just not going to do that. That's the Gadsden Purchase, okay? This little territory that I'm going to draw. Shoot, I'm going to use a highlighter. I'm going to use a different color highlighter here. Let's see if I can do, well, that didn't work. Anyway, this That is the Gadsden Purchase. This is the Mexican Secession, which we get in 1846. This is what we get in 1845 with Texas all the way up into Colorado, a little bit into Wyoming. We get part of Oklahoma, Texas, part of Arizona. In the Mexican Secession, or New Mexico, excuse me, we get Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah, part of, again, just a little bit there of Wyoming. We've already got this section in 1840-ish from Great Britain. So we start to see the boundary of the United States really starting to take shape. We also in 1821 have purchased Florida, La Florida, from Spain, right? So then big stuff starts to happen. In 1848, the same time that we're winning this war with Mexico, this most precious of material is found in the West, in California, gold. In Sutter's Mill, California, the Sierra Nevadas near San Francisco, by God, it's gold. And Americans get gold fever. Now, 1848 is not, 1849 is the huge gold rush. Actually, in 1846, there's a gold rush here in North Carolina, just on the other side of Charlotte, going eastward, around Union County area. Huge Reed's gold mine down there. Huge gold rush here in North Carolina and Georgia and South Carolina. But it was overshadowed by this massive gold rush in California, and thousands of Americans go, I can strike it rich by going to California. I'm going to California. If you could see me right now, I'm pointing westward. I'm pointing to California. That's where we're going to go. In 1849, that's where we go. And these people were called 49ers. And 49ers are coming from everywhere. They're coming from the United States. They're coming from Asia. They're coming from South America. They're coming from Europe, because gold. And here we have a miner 49er. If you're a Scooby-Doo fan, he was a fearsome creature. But 49er, there's also a nice little old song. Met a miner 49er, oh my darling Clementine. Right, my darling Clementine. Great old song there. We'll have to listen to it later when I get back. Anyway, the miners come out, and it's huge. San Francisco becomes a massive. San Francisco, this itty-bitty, minuscule, unimportant town, was nothing. Suddenly becomes the gateway to California and the gateway to gold. Gold, gold. I love the TV show. Anybody in here watch the TV show Gold Rush on Discovery Channel? I love the TV show Gold Rush. It's absolutely fantastic. They're up in Alaska looking for gold, but it's the same thing. We're looking for gold to strike it rich, make it rich. It's the American dream. And we see huge diversity. In 1849 alone, in these miners, 49ers, the population goes from about 14,000 in 1 year to over 100,000. And it's everybody. It's not just one group of people. It is everyone is piling into California. We're getting people from China. We're getting Chinese people coming in, because mine owners are going, hey, cheap labor from China. And Chinese are going, we like gold too. We want to make it rich. Free blacks from the east, from the north, are coming in. Mexicans are going, money, right? Everybody's about money. The Americans, the whites, the blacks, the Chinese, the South Americans, excuse me, Central Americans, they're all coming here to get land and to get money. And it's not even about land. It's about staking a claim, a certain section of a river or a creek bed, and you're going to pan for gold. And in 1849, California does something remarkable. It outlaws slavery. And in 1850, California joins the Union as a free state and becomes a state of the Union of the United States. And this is going to set up a whole new thing with how do we let states in? Are they going to be free states? Are they going to be slave states? By the way, the odd thing about California, it's the only state that never is a territory before it becomes a state. It's the only, or besides the original 13. But of the other, of the other 37 states of the United States, other than the first 13, California is the only one that was not a territory first. It went from being nothing to being a state. In one fell swoop, one statement, one thing, there it was a state. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we end the chapter. You can watch this again to pick up any more materials. I hope you have a great day. I will see you soon, I promise. Au revoir and ciao.